Welcome to Your College Bound Kid,
a podcast for parents, college counselors, students, and anyone who wants a deep dive into the world of college admissions.
Hi, this is Christina Lopez. I'm an enrollment strategy leader and founder of the Dean's Desk. I spent 20 years in admissions and financial aid, most recently as Dean of Enrollment Management at Barnard College, with previous roles at New York University. Today, I help families evaluate the true financial fit of every college on their students' list before they apply.
I'm Hillary Dickman, a parent of two and Senior Assistant Director of Admission at Colorado College.
I'm Mark Stucker, and I'm the founder and producer. Our mission is to make college knowledge available to all. We care deeply about your kid. We believe college is a match to be made and not a prize to be won. We believe in being genuine and transparent. We are committed to covering a variety of topics, including the tough subjects. Thanks to your generosity, we're committed to providing a minimum of 10 hours of fresh, commercial-free content every month, with episodes every Monday and Thursday. We have a variety of co-hosts because we believe and value diverse perspectives. You're our listening family, and we get great joy every time we meet with you as we do our best to give you tools so your students can soar and reach their limitless potential. Good morning, friends. Always a good day when I'm meeting with my cyber friends. You know, we do have this unique parasocial relationship. A lot of times I'll meet a podcast listener and they'll say, I feel like I know you. You're in my ear on my walk in my headphones, or you're in my car. And in a weird mystical way, like I wouldn't even know this person on an elevator, but I feel like it's reciprocal. You know, I feel the same thing. So I'm in a great mood today. I'm also in a great mood because our garden has never, ever looked better. Crepe myrtles are at their peak. I won't bore you with all the other things popping right now, but August 1, it's just a really, really good time. And as excited as I am for my big trip I've got coming up, here in a while. And, I'll be doing all kinds of admission stuff in the day. And then when kids are out of school, I'll be doing Zoom calls at night. I'm going to miss my garden. It's like missing your pet. Imagine if you were on the road for 6 weeks. Would you miss your cat or your dog? That's like my garden to me. That's my baby. But anyway, let me stop digressing, get back to today's episode. So today's episode, you'll hear from 3 listeners. I like it when listeners send in messages. They don't always have to send in questions. We had 3 listeners that send in messages. Sometimes it's opinion, sometimes it's feedback. As long as it's done respectfully and it's on topic, I'd say more than half the time we're going to air it on the air. So 3 listeners sent in messages this week that I thought were worthy of us airing. So we'll air those messages and super brief commentary on that. And then I'm really excited about a question that Hillary and I are going to discuss, because guess what, friends? The Common App is open. That's right. Common App open. It always opens like technically August 1st, but usually opens up like July 31st. And it did again this year. And so we're going to try and have some tips for you. And I really like the tip that Hillary and I are going to share with you. There's not that often that you could have a tip that somebody could do authentically, and it really could potentially cause a part of your application to pop in a really positive way. And that's what Hillary and I will be sharing with you today. I'm going to give you an update on our YouTube channel. And then we've got a brand new interview. Christina joined me to interview Andrea Saadi. And Andrea is an expert in evaluating colleges' financial health, similar to what Moody's and S&P, Global do, so that bond issuers and others looking at maybe investing in a school can determine what the riskiness is of that. And so over the next 3 weeks, we're going to be doing a deep dive. It's like an hour 20 altogether. So we'll split it. Not 3 weeks. I keep saying 3 weeks, 3 straight episodes. Thank you, Steve Topper out there, for challenging me to not do episodes on a Monday, and a Thursday. But we now go Monday, Thursday. So in 8 days, you'll hear the whole thing. Hopefully that makes it a little bit easier to have continuity and remember. So, you'll be hearing from Christina and Andrea Saadi and I over the next 3 weeks on a topic as we do a real deep dive into the financials on colleges. But without any further ado, let's transition to our first question or message that was sent in from a listener. So the first message has to do with our new website. Let's take a listen.
Hi, Mark. This is Lara from Delaware County. Again, I love the new website. I just love the look of it. It is so clean. It's just fabulous. I do have one suggestion. I don't know how easy it is to do this because I am not someone who develops websites, but on your college spotlight section, is there a way for you to also, in addition to the name of the university, list the date that it was recorded? I think that would be helpful in terms of realizing like how recent this is. Was this an interview done 6 months ago or 5 years ago? Because things change so fast that I just, when I'm absorbing information, I guess I kind of want to know how recent it was. Recognizing that some things are going to be the same, but some things might be different. And having that perspective in terms of a point of time would be great. So again, I'm not sure how easy that is, but that's just my suggestion for the website. But again, it's great. I love all the information you are putting out there. I'm not a YouTube user, but I'm learning because I do want 7 days a week of YCBK content. So thank you for your commitment to making this, available to all. I tell all my friends whose kids are also going through this process to listen to your podcast, and now I'll tell them to follow you on YouTube. Thanks again. Keep up the great work.
First of all, I've been hearing just stupendous feedback on the new website. I know I feel that way about it. I'm glad to know Laura feels that way as well. And I just got this message, and I just sent the request out to Mary and John. And hopefully by our next episode, I'll be able to get back to you with an answer. Maybe I'll ask them if they can go to SpeakPipe and share it, or either one of us, between you hearing from them or you hearing from me, we'll get back to you on an answer with her question. All right. Our next message comes from a mom in Florida. And she heard what Jed Appleruth said about the CLT, the Classical Learning Test, and she has a few thoughts. So let's take a listen.
Hi, I'm a mom from Florida, and I just wanted to thank you for your podcast. I've been listening a lot over the past year, and we have a few more years before my son's in college, but it's been really helpful. I was a little disappointed in Jed Appleruth's comments this last episode about the classical learning exam, and even more so about classical education, because I think his comments were really politically biased, as it's been in the news a lot. Classical education has actually been around for centuries, and it's really about teaching students to think for themselves. They learn to turn to the original sources to form their own opinions, and they look at different points of view and debate those topics, including really kind of contentious topics of today. And additionally, about the CLT, I think the main complaint by the Iowa Board of Regents and others is that basically CLT is too new, and those who have taken the exam are primarily from private institutions. So in short, the reason CLT isn't predictive is because it's still too early, too new, with too few comparable data points. So while the SATs and ACTs have been around for years, millions of students have taken them from different educational settings, CLT doesn't have that yet. So of course, it's going to be hard to have that comparison. I expect, though, with all these new colleges accepting the CLT, that they'll have those data points soon, even without the help of the College Board, who have been pretty hesitant to give them the points they need to compare to the SATs. So I do agree with Jed that the CLT needs to do more to prove its ability to predict academic success, but I think it's worth watching how they're going to grow in the future as they get more and more data. So I hope I've given you some context, a different point of view, and that is helpful to some listeners. I appreciate Jed and him giving his advice on the air. We just have this one kind of different point of view. Thank you so much.
All right, friends. Perfect timing. I am recording a YouTube video on Tuesday with guest host Chris Terriup. Chris is doing some substituting until we get Julia Esquivel back. That'll be the middle of 2027 when she's off her sabbatical. I'm going to have some guest hosts in here. Christina's filled in as a regular host in a major way, picked up the slack. But now that we're daily, I do need a lot of host coverage. I don't want to burn out anybody like I burned out Anik and Dave. So I need to have a lot of coverage. So we're going to actually take on this question in more depth. And that recording is set for Tuesday, although it's not going to air until September. So go onto YouTube and you'll have even a fuller answer from a different perspective. And I wanted Chris to do it because, Chris spends many months in the year in Florida. So he's got a sort of on the ground perspective there. All right. One more message from a listener. And this is another response to a couple of times we've addressed this topic. And it has to do with a student not being excited to go to college. Let's take a listen.
Hi, Mark and team. This is Jessica from Northern Virginia, longtime listener, periodic correspondent. I'm catching up a little on my podcast episodes, but I wanted to send some positive feedback for the question from a listener that you put on the air and answered about the student who was not excited to be heading off to college. I just wanted to affirm how important it is that we normalize the full range of emotional churn around the college planning and college going process for families. Personally, I'm a parent coach to parents of adolescents, an IEC, and a parent of a college sophomore and a high school junior. So I'm very deeply attuned to what is happening in the family system in this process. And I found that when we put a lot of pressure on kids as they're heading off to college to feel a certain way, or we expect them to feel a certain way, that can create a whole other layer of stress that can be hard to navigate. And I think you were so right to not focus too much on the future reassurances, because the teenage brain struggles with future thinking. And we're asking kids to get excited about something that they have yet to experience and have very little perspective on. I know with our daughter, when she was transitioning last year to her first year of college, she had very little excitement. And she had also won the golden ticket, that lottery to an Ivy League school. So people who chatted with her about where she was going just assumed that she was wildly excited. And she felt actually tremendously guilty that she didn't feel that way. And of course, as a family, we were able to process that guilt in at-home conversations and really reassure her that what she was feeling was also normal. We didn't focus on future reassurances. We didn't say it's all going to be okay, because I couldn't in good conscience do that. But what we could focus on was what skills she had within her to withstand the upcoming discomfort that was likely going to happen in this transition. We talked about other circumstances where she had had to be new or lonely or figure things out or talk with adults or advocate for herself or find her way into new teams or new groups. Our family moves a lot, so this was familiar territory for her. But it was her first time back into a fully American culture from an international experience. So there was a lot going for her that she was unsure about. And to be honest, many of the things that she dreaded actually did come to pass in that first year, and it was a tough transition. But we provided lots and lots of support and also reminded her of the resources that were outside of her when she reached the limit of what she was able to do for herself and needed some other help or interventions or people to talk to, whether it was reaching out to her residential advisor or tapping into some of the mental health supports on campus, and also suggesting some student groups and activities that were a very low barrier to entry, a low threshold where she wasn't having to fight her way into it. And over time, all of those things worked together and brought her to the end of her first year with a lot more personal stability and what all of you alluded to when you answered the question, which is that sense of belonging, finding her people. So thank you for having that question on the air. Thank you for normalizing it for parents. And let's keep doing that. Let's not assume how kids should feel about things. And as adults, asking teenagers in our lives, whether they're our own or close to our family in some way, rather than saying, "Are you excited?" Let's just ask, "How are you feeling about heading off to college in the fall?" And let the students lead with what they're feeling rather than us assuming. Thanks again so much for all you do.
I think this was important because I do think normalizing this will not only diminish the stigma, but diminishing the stigma helps both the student and the parent. So I thought this was a timely message. And I like the suggestion of wording too. So hopefully you all found this helpful. All right, friends. So let's transition to the tip that I've been raving about. This is hot off the press. I'm sitting here recording this for you guys on Sunday, August 2nd. And Hillary and I recorded this on Friday, July 31st. And it has to do with the activities section of the Common App. Now, the activities has been really reconfigured. I mean, it's activities and experiences now. I've been asking for a change in name for a while. And there's some other changes as well. So we are going to have to come back and either have a YouTube video or an Audible section and explore that a little bit more. But I know amongst our co-hosts, we've been blowing each other's phones up, talking about the change, the change in the new activities and experience section in the Common App. And so this is just touching on that. But this is a real unique opportunity that we feel students have that oftentimes is a missed opportunity. So take a listen and hear Hillary and I in the discussion we have. Hey, Hillary.
Hey, Mark. How are you?
Good. Friends, I have asked Hillary if she would join in with me and share an admissions tip, something that I notice really makes an activity list pop or not pop. And she feels the same way, so we're going to talk about it. So it has to do with a lot of times when students are completing the activities list, they just cram in a lot of stuff and it feels like a resume and it's just numbers or accomplishments or it's just purely descriptive. But I find that the ones that really resonate, and I know I'm asking a lot because it's 150 characters or 30 words, but they find a way to get in a little bit of how their experience impacted them. So it's not just what they did, but how the experience impacted them. So take that where you want to go, Hillary. Something I've been wanting to talk about on the podcast for a while.
Yeah, I would say it can be how the experience impacted them or how it impacted others. Either one is great. Kind of like you hear if you're a parent listening to this, you know that on your resume as an adult, like you're encouraged to use numbers to show impact. There are students who have the opportunity to do that, right? If they became president of the sustainability club at their school, to be able to tell us like the increase in the number of students who came or the increase in the number of pounds of compost that they made or whatever they're doing, you can show impact that way. But from that same example, as president of the sustainability club, you might also be able to show the impact on you, what you learned, like that you learned how to follow proper meeting procedures or how to put together a meeting agenda and making sure that you were getting it out to your members before the meeting started. Those sorts of things where you're learning skills that are going to be helpful for you to have in that same sort of leadership role when you get to college. That's just the first example that pops into my mind. But I think you can do both, or not both at the same time because you don't have enough characters, but one or the other, right? Where you can show impact on a community or a group, or you can show how you've grown from that experience.
And I completely agree here. The reason why I think I never went there is, and this is on us, me, myself, and us as my company, but so we have an example that we've been sharing that has some of that impact on others. And that, so then when I get drafts, I'm getting that. I'm getting that probably because people are following the template, right? But I realize, let's show another one. Working this summer with quadriplegics and seeing their joy on their faces, what made me want to be a special ed major. Like little things like that, I think are really powerful.
Yeah.
And I don't see any of that. And it's probably because I'm not giving people an example, but even if a lot of times people come to you with what they've already done already, and I tend not to see any of that. Sometimes you see stuff, just stuffed. And it's a lot of accomplishments that in and of themselves look impressive. But this is a message I'm always saying to my students. Let me see your heart. It feels robotic. I'm not seeing your heart. And so I love, from your standpoint, how often do you see that? Either one of both of the things that we've talked about. So we've talked about impact on others. Yeah, it's super rare, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. And so when you do see it, it really stands out.
Yes.
Especially, I think, when it's a student where it complements sort of the rest of the picture of what you're seeing. Because for a student who's not, I'm going to go back to my president of the Sustainability Club example. If you're not talking about Sustainability Club in your essay, to be able to give us that additional sort of texture in the activity section is really helpful. And not just that you spent time doing this thing, but like, what was the impact on you or what was the impact on others? It's so rare that I can only think of like a few times actually when I've seen it done well. Because typically students are just telling us how they're spending their time, which is also important. I want to know how you're spending your time, but if you want to level up, then you're showing us the impact.
Yeah. And I think it's so easy to get lost in a sea of all of that. Like I never see what I shared with you when people show me their first draft. If they come already having done something, I never see it. It's only after a bit of coaching. But so it's listen out there, listeners, like anytime something is rare and it's good, it stands out. Now, that doesn't mean it's going to automatically tip you in because your transcript still needs to be competitive. And like Hillary said, if it's going to be more powerful when it's consonant with what's in the rest of the application versus if it feels discordant. So that piece of sort of consistency of this feels consistent with who you are, that's just an important piece. Talk to me about that a little bit, Hillary. Like, how often do you see consistent messaging versus inconsistent messaging? And when you see inconsistent messaging, but someone is sort of talking about something that's grandiose, but it's really inconsistent with everything else, like how does that land?
Yeah. Usually when I see that, it's in the essay and it feels like, well, a lot of times it feels like the essay was written by AI, right? Because AI writes really profoundly, like every sentence that it writes is like supposed to be super profound. And so sometimes you'll get an essay that's like that. And this was before AI too, where students just get very excited to write profound things, but then you're not seeing a lot that's like very profound in the activities list. It feels a little bit strange. It just feels a little bit out of place. I would say more what I see is students who have used the activities list to add additional like nuance to their application in a good way, right? Because they're not repeating themselves. It does get like if your activities list is you like 50 different things, not 50, 10 different things about soccer because all the ways that you engage in soccer, and then your essay is also about soccer, then you're like, wow, there's a lot of soccer going on here, but it not getting a lot about the rest of the students' sort of inner thought life or, you know, their world outside of soccer, even though soccer can be a super, you know, something with a lot of variations to it, because you might be reffing and you might be coaching a kindergarten team and you might be playing and you might be mentoring and whatever, but that doesn't necessarily come through. So it is lovely to get to hit on different parts of your life using all of the spaces available to you in the app.
I like talking to you about like things I'm seeing and what you're seeing and applications and talking like this. Another thing I see some more than I'd like to, and maybe it might have to do a little bit with the fact that we're always talking to our students that colleges do want to see positive impact. But what that can lead to is some kids who really force it in their writing. And the way they force it, one of the ways they force it, there's a couple ways I see them forcing it. One is like really going back to their activities in an unhealthy way where they're almost like not trusting that the admission officer is reading the activities section. You know, like I'm oftentimes saying to students, like your personal statement is not the place where you flex. Right. It's where you be reflective. I said, there's plenty of places to flex. You can flex in your activities list. You can flex in your honor section. You can flex on your resume, your third-party substantiators, counselor, teacher, other recs, they're flexing for you, but be reflective. But then I see some of my students that are going back and saying things over and over again that were said, and it's almost like, do they not think you're reading that? And then sometimes they say, I had so much impact. Like they're really like it's, you know, like be more inductive, just like show, don't tell.
Yeah, I was just going to say that.
Do you see that? Because I'm seeing a lot of this in student drafts.
Yeah. I think it's just so much easier as a writer. And this is not the student's fault. Most students have not taken a creative writing class or most students have not had instruction on how to write about themselves in a compelling way. And the easiest way to write something is just to write exactly what happened and to be very like straightforward about it. And so then you're saying like, I made an impact in blah, blah, blah by doing blah, blah, blah. Well, that's not a very fun thing for us to read. I would rather read it like it's a story and your experience that you had rather than detailing every step of it. And then it just ends up making a bigger impact. It keeps us more engaged in the writing and stands out more when we're reading really quickly too.
Nice. Awesome. Let's come back and do some more of these kind of little tips here and there in future episodes. I think our listeners will find them helpful. Thanks, Hillary.
Love it. Sounds good. Yeah, thank you.
Welcome. Hey, friends, I was editing this podcast in this particular conversation with Hillary, And I realized I forgot to say something. I don't want to speak for Hillary, but I feel I can say with high level of confidence she would agree with me on this. So you can't do what we've been discussing for all 10 activities. First of all, it will sound contrived and formulaic, and it will decrease the authenticity of your application. And secondly, you just don't have room with 150 characters. So what I tell my students is pick a couple places where you're going to talk about your impact on the organization. Use numbers at least some of the times to quantify it. It's not just your opinion. And then pick at least 2 where you'll talk about the impact that the activity had on you, your growth, how you changed, how you see things differently, how you are now inspired to do something as a result of your participation in the activity. Colleges are extremely interested in your impact, and they're also extremely interested in how anything that you've done, how it's molded you, shaped you, and made you who you are. But you can't do it for all 10 activities. And I forgot to say that, and I just want to throw it in here. That's the luxury I get of being the editor. I get to not just be able to record what I think of in the moment, but throw in some, hopefully, bolts of inspiration post-editing. Hopefully this is helpful. Thanks. All right, friends, I promised you a YouTube update. So the first thing that I want to say is thank you. Thank you. Because in some ways, starting this YouTube channel reminds me of starting the podcast. And I'll tell you a couple of reasons. So we started the podcast, and I've shared this before, like 228 listeners in the first month. And, now we get between 40 to 50,000 every month downloads. Well, like starting YouTube all over again, right? Back down to start. But thanks to you all, 300 people subscribed this week. And we just started open up the channel on Wednesday. And I know a lot of them are listeners because some have reached out through text, through email, or put a comment on YouTube. So we're both reaching our existing audience and a new audience. I was looking at some of the demographic information, and YouTube gives you that as well, which is pretty cool. So just like our podcast, most of our listeners are parents between 40 and 60. Same thing on YouTube. But interesting thing on YouTube is we're 55% ladies and 45% men, which is a lot more guys than on the Audible podcast. So I don't know the reason for that. Maybe guys like to watch TV more. I don't know. But I just want to thank all the 300 people who have subscribed. I want to thank anyone who's rang the bell notifications to get current videos. Anyone who's left a comment. We're trying to create a community there where we can talk back and forth between the week about episodes. Special thanks to anybody who left a comment, anyone who shared a video with anyone, anyone who's done and any of those things. And even actually watching a video all the way through, like YouTube drives the content out to people who are in your similar demographic if you do all that. So what I'm going to start doing is on Mondays, I'll just let you know the videos that are going live for the week. But because I haven't done that, I'm going to take today to let you really fast. I'm going to blow through. We have 15 videos up already. So really quickly. So Susan and Christina, they joined me initially to talk about how colleges don't always represent their finances the way they actually are. That's part of our Grinding Your Gear series. Hillary joined me in a Grinding Your Gear series as well. When colleges, oftentimes when they defer an applicant, and they're hardly likely to ever admit them, but they defer them anyway. So we do a Grinding My Gears on that. We've started a frequently asked questions series. Vince joined me. We have a video up there on how do you work with your school counselor more effectively. Kevin joined me in the frequently asked questions section to do one on why go overseas. What are the 5 reasons students go overseas? Carter joined me in the frequently asked questions section to do one on tips for writing your teacher tips for who to ask for teacher recommendations. And then we have our long form interview with New York Times bestselling author Bill Deresiewicz on his book, Excellent Sheep. Long form meaning like 35 minutes or longer. The others are like, 8 to 20 minutes. Then we also have, let's see. Oh yeah. Next one was Susan. And she joined me on how long do admission officers take to read an admission file. And actually that one, as well as the Bill Deresiewicz Excellent Sheep, have been the 2 most listened to video or watch video. I'm in YouTube mode. I'm in podcast mode, so I'm probably say listen when it's watch. But a lot of people just listen to it anyway, right? You don't have to watch, you can listen. So that one is up. And then we did another one in the frequently asked questions section. And that was on what is holistic admissions. And Kate joined me to do that one. And then Susan and Christina joined me to do another grinding my gears. And this is when a parent says it isn't fair that they took another classmate over my kid. So some of our grinding my gears are things that grind our gears that parents and students do. And some of them are things that grind our gears that colleges do. We have a mixture. Then Harley joined me back again in the Grinding My Gears series. When colleges are secretive about an applicant's chances of getting in. We did another long form video with Bill Deresiewicz on his most recent book, The End of Solitude, which, by the way, everybody should really watch that one. The Excellent Cheap one is great, but it applies to more to people looking at selective schools. But The End of Solitude applies to every single parent and every single student. So that was up. And then Kevin also joined me to do a video on what's the difference between going to the UK for college and going to the US for college, as well as, how do colleges overseas make decisions differently than in the US. Christina and Susan joined me again, another Grinding My Gears, about 8 awards that are not clear. And then we have another Grinding My Gears with Susan and Christina on when students and parents believe that college discriminate against them in favor of low-income students. So I might have missed one or two in there, try to rattle them off quickly. I'm not going to do that ever again. In the future, I'll just do ones coming up for the week. But I basically gave you every video that we've released for the last 12 days. So we encourage you to check out the YouTube channel. And without any further ado, here is a message about our new Instagram page, our new YouTube channel, and our new website. Friends, we are in year 9 of our podcast, but July 21st, 2026 was the most important day of our podcast history. On July 21st, we launched a brand new YourCollegeBoundKid.com website. As soon as an episode goes live, you can now listen on YourCollegeBoundKid.com instantaneously. And as soon as a YouTube video goes live, it is up on the new website. The website is cleaner. Interviews and the spotlights and past episodes are so much easier to navigate. Special shout out to a brother-sister team, Mary LaChance in Connecticut and John Rooney in New York, who, by the way, are volunteering their services to help us make college knowledge available to all and being our webmasters. You have to check out the new YourCollegeBoundKid.com. The feedback so far on the new website has been off the charts. Effusive. Another thing happened on July 21st. We went from a Monday, Thursday, Audible podcast to a daily podcast. We now have YouTube videos that drop every Sunday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Friday, and Saturday. That is every day we don't have an Audible podcast. Most of these videos are between 10 to 20 minutes, but every 6 videos, a long-form video, a deep dive with a thought leader in admissions or higher ed. Our Your College Bound Kid podcast YouTube channel is more than just a place to learn. It's a community forum, and we can use that comment section on YouTube to interact with each other and strengthen our bonds in our community. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. Stuck. You're killing me. I mean, I love the pod, but 7 days a week? Are you serious? Thanks to Sony Patel from Kansas City, every one of those 5 days we drop a new YouTube video, she will send out a video trailer on Instagram that will preview the YouTube video that went live earlier that day. So you can take 60 seconds to watch the Instagram video trailer, and then you can decide if the 10 to 20 minute YouTube video is worth your time. Now, if you're not signed up for our Instagram, it's just @YCBK Podcast. That's @YCBK Podcast. One more time, that's @YCBK Podcast. We are excited and we look forward to interacting with you, our listening family, in the comment section on YouTube. All right, friends, let's transition to a brand new interview. It's with Christina and it is with Andrea Saadi. And it's on how organizations that assess the stability of a school financially, what's the process that they use, and how can you know whether or not a school is financially stable or not? It's a 3-parter. Let's listen to part 1 of 3.
And now this week's interview with a special guest.
Friends, we have a brand new interview with Andrea Saadi, assessing which colleges are financially risky. It's part 1 of 3. Andrea gives her background. Andrea assesses the financial challenges colleges are facing. And Andrea distinguishes between a budget crunch and a budget crisis. Listen and enjoy. Friends, I am beyond stoked today. I am here with one of our co-hosts, Christina Lopez. Hi, Christina.
Hi, everyone.
And we have a special guest, Andrea Saadi. So, friends, I continue to be just blown away by the talent and the experiences that we have within our listenership. I'm not going to go off on a tangent and share all the incredibly talented people that I've met through this podcast, many of whom are now helping in the production of the podcast. But I will tell you, Andrea is one of them, and she's a regular listener, never misses an episode. And when she heard the 11-part series I did, the Chronicle on Higher Ed on the budget crunch, she said, I need to reach out. And so she reached out and we spoke, and she has a very unique background in the financial world in assessing colleges' vitality and viability, similar like to what Moody's and S&P do. But I'm not going to say any more. You're not here to listen to me. You get that 7 days a week now. Andrea, thank you for coming on and tell us your backstory.
Thank you, Mark. And hi, Christina. So nice meeting you guys both. Thanks for having me. So I'm thrilled to be here. And yes, as Mark said, so for more than 20 years, my professional career has focused on evaluating bonds and loans issued by colleges and universities throughout the country. During this time, I've evaluated upwards of about 150 billion of debt, covering everything from public flagships to private regionals. Within the industry, this role is known as a municipal credit research analyst. The purpose of the role and the work that I do is to assess the credit worthiness and long-term financial resilience of colleges and universities. Said more plainly, it's basically their ability to borrow and repay their debt. The goal is to help investors and lenders make informed decisions about providing billions of dollars in financing. And the role is part financial analyst, part sector strategist, and part risk manager. I'm also the co-founder of ASC College Consulting. And just as importantly, I'm a mom of 2 soon-to-be college students. So I understand these issues from a variety of perspectives. I would say that in the same way that college admissions is complex and nuanced, credit analysis exhibits many of those same similarities. There are a lot of different variables. They are all examined in context and not in isolation. So when I'm reviewing a school, I'm not looking for one red flag or one magic number. I'm looking at trends. I'm looking for momentum and direction, if you will. Things that I'm asking myself would include, is student demand stable and sufficient to sustain future revenues? Are financial resources growing or are they being depleted? Is this institution generating enough cash to support operations and debt? And can management absorb higher costs to adapt to a changing landscape? All the while, essentially trying to answer the one question from a professional perspective is, can this school repay its debt under stress? So in order to answer these questions, it requires a comprehensive and highly technical deep dive into a handful of factors, such as the university's market position, its operating performance,
Andrea,
its financial...
I'm going to stop you for a sec.
Okay.
This is fascinating. You know, our listeners really want to know, can I know that the schools that my student is looking at, how stable are they? One, are they going to close? And if they're not going to close, they're just going to limp along and find out that, serious departments that my kid has real strong interest in are closing or wide-scale layoffs. Mm-hmm. So I'm curious, how did you get into this work? Tell us a little bit about that, because you never shared that. How did you get into this work, and what kind of training do they provide when you get there?
So I came into it out of grad school. I went to NYU, got my MBA from Stern, and was recruited.
Christina looks like a cheerleader over here. You should see her waving her arms.
I was recruited to a small financial firm that was in the industry known as a bond insurer or a guarantor. And they were guaranteeing municipal bonds. And this was in a space that existed much more robustly than it does today. This was pre-financial crisis, pre-global financial crisis. Got my MBA from Stern. Yeah.
Where did you go for undergrad?
I started at University of Miami, transferred after my freshman year, ended up at Seton Hall. I grew up in New Jersey. So,
okay.
graduated from there, then did a couple of years at Goldman Sachs, and then decided that I wanted my MBA and, I wanted to be more on the financial asset management side of things. And so
I'm working with a client
back.
right now who is transferring after her first year at Miami because I'm like, girl,
it's not
it
for
does not.
everybody.
Well, and it's also, she was about to rack up $100,000 in student loan debt by her sophomore year. And I was like, girl, no.
Yeah.
So
there's a lot of similarities to that, to what it was then in 1996 when I went and now, but it's also changed a lot as well. And it definitely was not as difficult to get into or as expensive.
Correct. Yes.
It wasn't a fit for me. So again, talking about fit and financial fit for sure, it was not the right place for me.
Agreed.
All right, Andrea, we need to know, because curious minds want to know, how did you get into this work? Because I can hear someone saying, how do you get that job? Like, what's the path?
Right.
Talking to us about that.
So for me, I came out of graduate school. I went to NYU Stern, and I was recruited into a firm called a monoline insurer or a bond insurer. And this was an industry that I really hadn't known very much about. And they were guaranteeing municipal bonds. They also had a handful of other things that they were doing over there. But basically, the business model was ensuring timely payment of principal and interest on municipal bonds. And so I spent a couple of years there. And then the global financial crisis hit in 2008. And even though municipal bonds were not the problem because municipal defaults are extremely rare, the industry collapse was basically caused by explosion of the structured finance and housing boom. And that side of the company had some financial issues. And so no new business was being written. And the next step was for me to basically take all of that knowledge and go to an investment management company. And so I've spent probably the last 2 decades in a variety of different investment management shops on Wall Street. And again, focusing on it from the perspective of I'm an investor or I'm a lender in the particular issues of higher education. So I cover other sectors, not just higher ed, but higher education and healthcare are 2 of the primary sectors that would be held in portfolios, or if it's a bank and they're like lending out the money. These are the very common sectors and for the borrowers. So I follow that space closely.
All right. Christina has a question. Christina is probably the most excited, enthusiastic person I know about like money and how schools operate. Our listeners, you missed this, but you may know this or you may not, but Christina has a degree from NYU. She worked in admissions at NYU for a long time. So when Andrea said NYU, like you can't see the visuals, but we had a cheerleader action going here. She flipped into a cheerleader. She had the wave going. So
drinking my coffee out of my NYU mug.
Yes, using the NYU mug. She's all in. So what would be your question, Christina?
Yes. So we have been talking a lot about higher ed's budget crunch, whether that is because of the enrollment cliff that's affecting schools or just the economy's, increase in costs, et cetera. But you've drawn a distinction between a budget crunch and a budget crisis. And you also said that it's not landing evenly across the sector. So where's that line, and which types of institutions are feeling it the most?
So you're right? There's lots of uncertainty, lots of unpredictability. You mentioned a handful of things that are happening, and the impacts are definitely unbalanced and uneven. I would step back and say that at its simplest level right now, the basic issue is supply and demand, right? So for starters, there's just too many seats and not enough students to fill them. Mm-hmm. As you said, there's this demographic cliff, but I think it's being exacerbated by shifting student preferences towards bigger national brands and away from smaller regional campuses. And when you see that there are schools that are growing, they're doing so at the expense of others, right? Mm-hmm. So you have these strong national brands, high rankings, low acceptance rates. They tend to have size and scale, revenue diversity, large balance sheets, large financial capacity, substantial pricing. And with that, they have the capacity to manage this current environment, and they will remain most resilient. On the other hand, the most vulnerable institutions, getting to your answer, are going to be those that are tuition dependent, much less selective, small. They serve as a regional or a more narrow population. They tend to be located in areas where demographics are weakening, perhaps at a faster rate compared to national trends. And while they are mainly private, even small publics are not immune, especially some of the smaller regional satellite campuses of some of your larger flagships. All that being said, just because a college is experiencing these headwinds, it doesn't necessarily mean that that situation is dire or the school should be avoided. Headlines can sometimes be misleading, as you said, a budget crunch not being the same as a crisis. Mm-hmm. And, many institutions will be able to navigate this pressure, but it just requires a lot of thoughtful leadership, strategic planning, and then, understanding whether or not the challenges appear to be manageable. One of the things that I like to think about is, I don't know if you're familiar with the quote from Hemingway's famous phrase, "From the sun also rises," but it's gradually, then suddenly. So, what happens is this weakening occurs gradually. You have several years of enrollment pressure, increasing tuition discounting, recurring operating deficits, declining resources, right? So each year it reduces the financial flexibility. Little by little, that capacity is depleted. And then a catalyst, some unexpectedly large, whether it's an enrollment decline, a violation of a debt covenant, an unplanned expense, right? A macroeconomic shock, something that just wasn't budgeted for or wasn't planned. You think about all of the changes in the federal landscape right now. Mm-hmm. Any of those things can make that deterioration appear sudden, right? So my role as a credit analyst is to identify the gradual before the market is focused on the sudden, right? So this means looking beyond the current headlines or financial results and evaluating the direction, persistence, interaction of all those variables before the institution's capacity to absorb that next adverse event disappears.
Okay. I have a fantastic follow-up question to this. This is fascinating to me. So let's do a case study. You've got in the news right now, Syracuse, right? They're very publicly saying they're having a budget crisis. They're not going to meet their enrollment. They're closing programs, etc. Versus a school that has closed, Hampshire College, but announced they were closing years ago. And then it was kind of coming back, and then it wasn't coming back. And it's just been kind of on this slow little decline until their doors closed. So what is the difference between these two schools? And because the headlines will make you believe that, okay, well, Syracuse's president is saying we're having a budget crunch, then clearly I shouldn't send my child there. Like, what is that really the headline that we should be following? How did they come to those conclusions?
I mean, look, it's one place to start, right? Because the headlines grab your attention. Mm-hmm. But like I had said, there's no one particular factor that you look for, one particular red flag. It is as in college admissions, it depends, right? So there are lots of things to look at and lots of historical trends to look at. And, I think that the difference is that when you have a crunch, which is what Syracuse is having, there's routine or strategic adjustments that management makes. And these are signs of prudent budgetary management, right? These are good practices. These are things that someone like myself, if I was a bondholder for Syracuse's debt or a parent sending their kids there, I would be like, this is great. They're tightening the belt. They're taking a look at things. These practices are designed to sort of keep the spending aligned with their enrollment, with the revenues, with their institutional priorities before the pressure becomes severe, right? Crisis-driven measures are really they're usually abrupt, they're usually indiscriminate. They're intended to preserve cash, meet payroll, avoid a debt covenant violation, just keep that institution operating through the next several months or the next academic year. That crisis cutting then often ends up consuming or weakening the resources that the college needs to recover. Mm-hmm.
So I have a couple questions for you. They're two, and they're different, breaking all the question asking rules here. So this is in my counseling practice, we have this 170 question questionnaire. And one of the questions asks students their interest level on a scale of 1 to 10 in the following 5 campus settings. And their options are large city, small city, suburban, college town. And I used to have rural on there, and nobody wants to go to a rural school. Like, it was just getting destroyed. And so I thought, well, maybe I need to switch words. So I reworked it and I changed rural to remote. That was even worse. And so obviously there are some people that just love nature and they want to be in nature, but it is not very many. And so I'm wondering, do you see that in your assessment? Remote school? Because I know all the other things you said, low endowment, low brand recognition, tuition dependent, not that selective. I know all those things are correlated with riskiness. Do you also see remote rural as one of the factors? So that's question one. And then I know what you said, it's not only your small schools. I was recently meeting with Penn State about all of their satellite campuses that closed. That was a big deal in the Commonwealth, right? So we know it's not only that. My second question is all the factors that have been coming at colleges recently. I'll just name a few. I mean, we always go to birth, dearth, enrollment cliff, but like you said, there's the changing mindset that people have toward college. You've seen these surveys. Is college worth the money? Especially with males, especially with conservative male. I mean, it's like really dire compared to how it used to be. So that's a major headwind, right? We have the international students and their inability to get visas. We have FAFSA fiasco. We have changes in PLUS loans. We have the out-migration of students from the Northeast and the Midwest, people relocating to South and Southwest and certain things, remote. And the second is, which of all of these things coming at colleges do you feel is contributing the most to the budget crunch? So
I think you actually answered your first question by talking about all of the shifts that are happening, because it is very much like a student preferences societal shift in wanting to attend either the bigger, broader schools, whether it's for athletics or Greek life or just bigger, more offerings or change in weather or just, again, the coolness factor, like the schools that are growing or getting more applications organically are the ones that have figured out ways to market themselves in such a way that it's attracting the students. And so you have the enrollment demographic cliff is already uneven because it's mostly occurring in like the West and the Northeast. And I would say that those are the geographic areas where there's substantial or a higher concentration of some of those smaller schools. They don't necessarily have to be totally rural or remote, but they are smaller and in, like not cities, not big cities or big college towns. And so put it all together. And that's what I think is exacerbating it, is that the demographic shifts are happening at a much faster rate in the Northeast and places like Ohio and Michigan. And those are going to be the areas where some of these schools you're seeing are having these challenges. That's definitely part of it. I mean, probably one of the biggest parts. I don't think that those schools are actually being negatively impacted from the international enrollment. I mean,
they were never there.
Sorry?
No, I was saying they were never really there in large numbers anyway.
There wasn't a heck of a lot of dependence on international students at those schools. And they're actually also, when you think about like revenue diversity, and the smaller schools being so tuition dependent, they're actually insulated from a lot of the noise that's been happening that's affecting the bigger schools, the bigger like brand name schools, the R1 research universities that are struggling with all of these other changes by the administration. So they're not losing their
like
research funding
or endowment tax, stuff like that.
Yes, only a handful of them. I mean, the endowment tax existed pre the big beautiful bill. It just didn't impact the same number of universities. And interestingly, under the big beautiful bill, it actually impacts less universities by number because the threshold is now I believe it's under 3,000 students. I have to go back and check my notes. So the threshold is lower, but the tax rate itself was stratified by the endowment value per student. And so certain schools are going to pay substantially more. So Harvard, for example, I think was always subject to the tax at 1.5%, but now it's closer to 6 or 7%, whatever that top stratification is. I don't have the numbers in front of me. But again, that's not what's causing any of the budget stresses or crunches at these other schools. It's really just a matter of having it's supply and demand.
So you haven't said, or you haven't accentuated. And my sense it's a pretty big one is the changing attitudes toward college. Like, now that partly gets articulated in the context of something I should have mentioned in that list was people are fed up with the tuition increases. They're fed up with the cost. I should have mentioned that in my long list. But then they're also somewhat correlated, right? Because cost is always correlated with value. And some of that may be, there's lots of reasons for that, right? There's people feeling college is woke. There's the whole woke backlash there. But then there's also the competing alternatives now. You have certificates and badges and people out there, 3-year program. There's a lot of rising alternatives and even a shifting mindset, even somewhat in the employer world. You have people like Shapiro and other governors that are saying all these government jobs you no longer need degrees for. And that movement is that also contributes. So is this a factor at all, or is it kind of a minuscule factor when you look at things?
Absolutely. But I think that just still comes back to supply and demand. There's just not enough. There's too many seats and not enough kids. Right. And then it's about where they want to go. When they've decided that they still want to go to college and it's a 4-year college and there is still value, then it's deciding on actually where to apply and where to go. And it just seems like right now, everybody wants to go to the same, 100 to 250 roughly schools, right? Those are the ones that are just seeing substantial increases in, applications, acceptance rates in the single digits. Like that's where so much of the noise and the momentum seem to be going.
Well,
at the expense of all of these other smaller, wonderful schools that are just going to be in this situation where are they going to survive, or how long will they survive? It's just a matter of, do they have sophistication of management to be able to, identify the trends and the momentum and fix it, or merge, or again, I just identify what's happening in their particular space. Are they making the changes that they need to continue to protect, core academic functions, invest in other things, or is everything that they're doing sort of, one-time measures that's, not actually, restoring balance, so to speak. At some point, it becomes, a spiral, a self-reinforcing cycle, because the latest stage indicator, right, is accreditation risk. And so when you get to a point where the financial problems really begin to affect academic quality, institutional continuity, governance, or, the likelihood that the students that are enrolled there are not even going to be able to complete their programs, that becomes a real issue when the accreditors get involved, right? Because now the school, becomes ineligible to participate in any of the student aid programs. And that therefore intensifies that enrollment pressure, their liquidity pressure, their cash flow. And you get this self-reinforcing cycle of how do you get out of it at that point?
Yeah. So I can also imagine when you're thinking about the effects of enrollment, if they are a tuition-driven institution revenue-wise. So, those smaller regional colleges were critical in producing the workforce for those regional areas, right? But now with the economy shifts that are happening, those job markets are smaller or declining. And so it leads students to assume that the best places where I will have the most job prospects are in the larger cities, right? So that might be also what's driving that student preference away from these smaller, more rural, remote, what have you, schools, and how that then affects their enrollments and the employment of that particular area. So it's kind of, like you said, it's a cycle. It's a self, it's a cycle that's affecting everything.
And that's one of the other, bigger, I guess, concerns or challenges with those smaller programs, is because they are sometimes one of the largest employers in that town. Like the whole economy is built and driven around the presence of that school and those buildings and that land. And that's another conversation for another day as to what to do with the school that now, closes. Some have been very, very lucky with finding a partner and schools, bigger schools coming in and setting up a new campus, et cetera. But that's unlikely to be the case for all of the schools that are struggling, because again, it's supply and demand and just too many seats. I think that less seats are where we're headed at some point.
Friends, this concludes part 1 of 3 of Christina and I interviewing Andrea Saadi. Hope you join us next week for part 2. All right, friends, on Thursday's episode, we're going to have another conversation with Hillary, and we're going to take a look at why are so many schools dropping their custom prompt. That's my preferred name, their college-specific essay. If you're old school, their supplement or their sup. Why are so many schools dropping them this year? And it's across levels of selectivity. So we're going to explore that. And I got asked that by literally a listener sent me a text this morning. And I replied back, tune in on Thursday because we're going to be covering it. So we're going to cover that, and you'll have, part 2 of the interview with Christina and Andrea Saadi on, of course, colleges and their money. So hopefully you'll join us back for that. Now, friends, I have a recommendation of a book. Every once in a while you read a book and it just has a real profound impact on you, and you need to shout it out to everybody. And so, there have been several books like that for me over the years. One of them was Enough as She Is by Rachel. Oh my goodness, I'm drawing a blank on her last name. Believe that. But it's about the incredible pressure that young ladies are under, when it comes to trying to be everything and how it's blown their circuits. That was a very powerful book. And I bought copies for all my nieces and daughters when I read that one. One of the most profound books I've ever read is Unequal Childhoods. Fascinating combination, the intersection between sociology, education, race. Love that book. Just really sometimes these books just literally shape your thinking. I remember reading a book called Lyconomics by Professor Johns Hopkins. That was a very powerful book that shaped my thinking. And fortunately, I got to meet him twice and got to talk to him. Well, this is a book I started reading like a year and a half ago, because this book's been out now for about a year and a half or 2 years. But I just really decided to just go all in on it this week. And is it ever powerful? And the book is called Never Enough: When Achievement Culture Becomes Toxic and What You Can Do About it. Never Enough: When Achievement Culture Becomes Toxic and What You Can Do About it. I can't recommend this book more highly. I feel like this book is extremely consistent with the theme and the messaging that we talk about on this podcast all the time. And I think that so many of our listeners would really, really benefit if they would read this book, take notes, talk about it with your kids. Never Enough: When Achievement Culture Becomes Toxic. I'm personally going through it as an audiobook right now. It's by Jennifer Breheny Wallace. Jennifer Breheny Wallace. Never Enough: When Achievement Culture Becomes Toxic. And the thing about it is it may as well be a college admissions book, because so many of the references and the application that are made in the book are to college admissions. And so after having read that book this week, I can't help but close with this. It's not where you go. It's not where you go. It's not where you go. It's what you do when you get there. It's what you do when you get out of there. That's what's going to determine your career success. And you can actually do that with your mental health in check. I mean, one of the reasons I'm so passionate about it is because when you read a book like Never Enough, you see the consequences of that mindset of I have to go to a T20 school, which is ridiculous. So only 1% of colleges in this country are any good? Yeah, that book shows the consequences we're paying as a country for that mentality. So I encourage you to listen to it, check it out, and look forward to seeing you on Thursday, friends. And that's our show. A big thank you to you, our listeners, for tuning in this week. If you find this podcast helpful, please follow us, and you will get every single episode as soon as they are released. If you want to support our podcast, you can click the share button and send it to your friends and acquaintances. You can say positive things about YCBK on social media, and you help us stay commercial-free and pay our staff by donating at yourcollegeboundkid.com and clicking the donate button. You can write a review for us on Apple or Spotify. If you have a question or suggestion, just go to speakpipe.com/YCBK, hit the orange button, and speak, and we will do our best to get your question or your comment in your own voice on an upcoming episode. I'm the producer of the podcast, and I live in Metro Atlanta. We have a fantastic team that has over 200 years of admission and counseling experience. Shout out to our co-hosts, Susan Tree in Pennsylvania, Lisa Ruff in North Carolina, 2 admission officers from Colorado, Hillary Dickman from Colorado College, Kate Strickland from CU Boulder, Vince Garcia in California, Julia Esquivel in Massachusetts, Linda Depker in Missouri, Andy Strickler, the Chief Enrollment Officer at Connecticut College, Keith Einstein, the Chief Enrollment Officer at TCU in Fort Worth, Carter DeLauro, a co-director of college counseling in New York, and Christina Lopez, the former Dean of Admission at Barnard College, and our international college specialist, Kevin Newton from Dallas, Texas. Our stupendous sound engineer who makes everything happen is Nemanja Matvic from Serbia. Our reliable webmaster is John Rooney. Website updates are done by Joy Stucker. Image editing by Vlad Honchar. And what would we do without our volunteers? Guy Pillsbury, Sony Patel, and Andy Bernstein are all helping us with podcast marketing. Carolyn Wood, Mark Doniger, and Carrie Roberts book interviews with thought leaders. Amanda Dugan, Colleen Sinoki, Nicole Resch, Trevor Smith, Ryan Stepler, and Lynn Labash send thank yous to interviewees. If you want a coaching session with me, just text me at 404-664-4340. If you want to reach someone else on our team, all of our bios with contact info can be found at yourcollegeboundkid.com under the About YCBK tab. If you want to get our free monthly newsletter, YCBK Plus, it's also under the About YCBK tab. If you want to see our recommended books and websites, they are on our website under the Resources tab. While you're on our website, check out our hundreds of interviews in their entirety. Check out our college spotlights and our upcoming events and receptions. And you can now do searches for past content by using our new Explore and Topics tabs. We really encourage you to explore our past content. We have close to 1,000 hours. We think of you as our listening family, and we look forward to meeting with you every single Monday and every single Thursday.